Good morning. This speech will be in English. So if you need a translation, you better get a device. It's a great pleasure to be back in Mexico, and especially in Chihuahua, a place that I have not been before.
Al que no me había tocado venir antes. Desde que llegué, todo el mundo se ha comportado de manera fabulosa. Entonces, quiero felicitarlos por este congreso. Es un gran honor estar representando a Manpower Group en esta reunión tan importante de líderes de pensamiento clave que tiene que ver con derecho del trabajo y empleo. Mucho del futuro de lo que ocurra en este país y en los países a su alrededor va a depender de las actividades en las que ustedes se involucren. Primero que nada, me disculpo personalmente. Tengo un poco de resfriado, tengo la nariz tapada, los oídos tapados, así que si les suena como que estoy gritando, yo pienso que no estoy gritando, no me alcanzo a oír bien, pero bueno, voy a hacer mi mejor esfuerzo. Esto es lo que me pidieron que hablara el día de hoy. Algunos puntos pequeños. El futuro del trabajo en el mundo, a medida que entramos en la era humana. El futuro del talento, a medida que el talentismo reemplaza el capitalismo. La responsabilidad de contribución social de las grandes corporaciones y el futuro del reclutamiento ético. Y tengo 50 minutos. Esto podría un pequeño problema porque tenemos muchísima información que cubrir. Entonces voy a tratar de... Voy a darles muchos puntos de datos y anoche conté cuántos puntos de datos tengo en esta presentación y son 390, así que sería conveniente que anotaran algunos. Les agradezco de nuevo la invitación, pero primero que nada, considerando que yo viajo tanto, más o menos 320 días del año estoy viajando, quiero decirles cuál es el estado del mercado laboral global en estos momentos. Apenas en la semana pasada estuve en Corea, Hong Kong, Berlín, Moscú, París, Houston, Nueva York y finalmente llegué a Chihuahua en una sola semana. Déjenme darles algunas reflexiones de lo que yo veo que está pasando en el mercado global del trabajo y el empleo. A medida que ustedes diseñen su futuro y el futuro de este país, en el trabajo necesitan tomar en cuenta las dinámicas globales, pero permítanme que les dé una instantánea del mundo y su situación actual. No estamos en una buena situación. Hay 75 millones de jóvenes que no tienen empleo globalmente. En el mundo únicamente hay 1.200 millones de empleos de tiempo completo disponibles. Sin embargo, hay 5.000 millones de personas en el mundo mayores de 15 años y 3.000 millones de ellos quieren tener un empleo de tiempo completo. Yo creo que tenemos un problema en 1.200 millones de empleos disponibles contra 3.000 millones de personas que buscan empleo. Muchas veces la gente que quiere empleo no se encuentra en el lugar correcto, en el lugar donde
We're going to see some amazing dynamics in the next 20 years in the global labor market. Many more people are going to move to where work is, and much more work is going to move to where people are with the right skills. Employment growth, creating jobs, is a key priority for every global economy today. I have a great friend who works at the IMF. She's called Christine Lagarde. She is the Director General. And she says in every speech she makes what we need to do to create jobs in any economy. And it's very straightforward. This is not, as she says, rocket science. Here are the elements that you need to promote to create jobs in your economy. Number one, give young entrepreneurial business people access to finance. Give them access to money. Secondly, make sure you have good infrastructure, especially power and communications. Thirdly, make sure you create a business-friendly investment environment which encourages businesses to come to your location, be it city, province, or country. And finally, and I think the most important, make sure that you have a market-relevant workforce with the right skills, in the right place, at the right time, at the right cost. There is a formula for fixing any economy in the world, but it's really, really hard in this environment to get governments to accept that. We have what I call dysfunctional labour markets on a global basis. We know what the problems are, but we don't seem to be able to fix them. If we could fix the labour market problems, why do we have the following? There are 24.5 million people unemployed in Europe alone. However, there are 4.9 million unfilled jobs. Why do we have a problem with supply and demand in labour? Why can't we fill almost 5 million jobs when there are 25 million people unemployed? The story is the same in the United States. There are 8 million jobs posted every week in the United States, but there are still 13 million people looking for a permanent job. Why can't we synchronize the development of skills and competence to fill the jobs that are available? There are many root causes to this problem, and in every economy we must fix that problem because the world is changing very, very fast. So the world is not a very efficient labour market, and I spend most of my life flying around the world talking to governments, cities and provinces about how to fix this problem. And you will realize, being very intelligent people, it's not complicated. The problem is that we do not seem to be able to synchronize political policy with business needs because we work on different time horizons and at different speeds. We have a responsibility as we go forward to synchronize the political construct and the economic construct, or else we will fail as a global economy. And by the way, in every crisis there is an opportunity, and the crisis today is a global recession. During this recession, we have an opportunity, and a huge one, to fix some of the basics. Fix some of the basics in Europe. Fix a dysfunctional economy, a dysfunctional union, and a dysfunctional labour market in Europe. Finally, understand that North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico essentially operate as an integrated economy and thus should have an integrated labour market. To understand that the old world of economics has changed. The last fashion that we talked about was the BRIC economies driving the future global growth. BRIC standing, as you know, for Brazil, India, Russia, and China. I'm sorry, that has changed, and it's changed very recently. Brazil and Russia have failed to reinvent their governance and financial structures, so they're not moving as fast, even in this recession, as India and China. India and China have joined in an economic super triangle with a country that hardly anyone ever talked about in the past, and that country is Indonesia. Indonesia has undergone massive reforms in terms of governance and financial controls over the last 2 years. Indonesia is the third most populous country in the world. What happens when you get three super economies working relatively well? China, India, Indonesia. It makes all of the economies inside of their geographic reach work better. They're acting like a dynamo, a turbocharger for countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and others in that region. That is the new economic global super region. Forget what you've been told in the past. If you have bilateral trade relationships, if you have bilateral labor relationships, if you have bilateral relationships of any kind with those countries, you should accentuate them today. I've been traveling to the World Economic Forum in Davos for 35 years, and I work very closely with the World Economic Forum. And we have many subsets of the work that we do in the Economic Forum. And one of them is to forecast the greatest global risks. And I want to tell you what we think the risks for the global economy and the global labour market are. And these are big headlines, but you've got to think about them as you design your local economy and your local labour market. The first global risk we've highlighted is cyber security, security of the internet and security of the computational world. I'll give you an example. I was in Hong Kong 4 weeks ago. A Hong Kong-based company was just about to do its initial public offering on the stock market. Some Chinese hackers brought down, on the eve of the quotation of that company, they brought down the Hong Kong Stock Exchange for 2 days, stopping the flow of $6.9 trillion of cash and destroying the initial public offering of a company they didn't like. That is cyber security. We must be able to secure our personal information, our financial information, and our economic information on the internet. Second global risk, demographics. People are being born all around the world, but for the developed market economies, they're being born in the wrong places. The largest growth in the world is in India and Africa, with China's growth in terms of population slowing. You still have positive demographics in the Central America area, but America's growth is starting to slow. Europe has a disaster of demography. The average fertility rate of Europe is 1.4 children per active female, when you need 2.1 kids per female to maintain a stable population. In the next 20 years, Europe loses 50 million workers because we're not having enough kids that are going into school, that are going to university, that are going into jobs. How does Europe, in its current climate, ensure we have enough workers to grow the European economy? Demographics will define much of the global economy. And as I said before, many people in future will move to where the work is, and many companies will move the work to where people are. So expect the globalization of the workforce to carry on in the human age. There is a chance, and this is a global risk, this is the third one, of reverse globalization. Because of the infectious nature of recessions, countries are going, maybe we shouldn't be global. Countries are saying, maybe we shouldn't be linked to all of the financial markets in the world. Maybe we shouldn't link our currency to the euro, the US dollar, or some other currency. Maybe we should be independent. Reverse globalization is a serious risk because we've gone too far down the road of globalization to ever go back. The last two, I won't talk about too much, but one is weapons of mass destruction. The potential for weapons of mass destruction to destroy peace processes and economies in regions like the Middle East, like the borders of China and Japan and other regions. The very last global risk is one that we have seen accentuate throughout this recession. On a global basis, the rich are getting richer and the poor are going nowhere. Average salaries in middle-class and upper-class families are accelerating away from working-class families. This is causing, in almost every economy in the world, what I call a social bifurcation, a split of society. In the old days, it was possible to be born into a poor family, get a decent education, find a job, work hard, and improve what you did in life. Earn more money, have a better living for your family. Today, if you are born poor, it's almost impossible to get access to education, to skills, and to jobs. And we see this separation of two societies in almost every global economy. These are huge risks. If you want to know how fast things go today, they go very fast. And when things go bad, they go very bad very quickly. I don't know if there are any golfing fans out there, but it's like when you start to play badly in golf, it goes downhill very, very fast, as you know. The global economy has the potential to do that. And here is the speed with which global issues change. Let me just remind you that 2.5 years ago, none of the following issues which impact global energy sources had happened. Look at energy security. In 2 years, here's what happened. The US and Canada discovered huge oil shale reserves, making the US and Canada one of the long-term largest producers of energy. Fukushima happened in Japan, the meltdown of a reactor, an energy reactor. This caused a huge debate about the future of nuclear energy. Germany, consequently, exited nuclear power production. Other countries are considering banning nuclear production of energy. The British petroleum disaster happened in the Gulf, which is very close to you. This changed the future of producing very deep oil in the sea. It'll never be the same again. The Arab Spring had not started, and the Arab Spring damaged oil and gas security throughout the Middle East, making the price of a barrel of oil go up exponentially. The Arab Spring impacted oil and gas. All of those things happened in 2 years. The world is moving faster and faster all the time. A very good professor friend of mine at Stanford gave a speech 2 weeks ago about how the world is changing, and I'd just like to repeat what he said in one sentence. He says, existing models around the world are not sustainable. Our ability as governments, companies, individuals, and societies to adjust to a new reality will define our future. The question is, can we tap into inner human potential? If we can, we're entering the human age. We're learning to tap into the greatest resource on this planet, which is the potential of human beings. As we go through this process of unleashing human potential, we've got to remember all of the external dynamics that are influencing us. Let me go into the future of talent and the future of what you had better be prepared for, what we had better be prepared for, what companies and governments had better prepare the workforce for. A decade ago, workers worried about jobs being outsourced overseas. Today, companies like Odesk and LiveOps can assemble teams in the cloud to do sales, customer support, and hundreds of millions of other tasks on a global basis in the virtual world. Global connectivity, smart machines, and new media are just some of the drivers shaping how we think about work, what constitutes work, and what skills are needed to take part in that world of work. I'm going to run you through some key drivers that will reshape the landscape of the world of work over the next 20 years. And they will define the skills that we need to develop in our economies to be successful in a global workplace. The first global driver is extreme longevity. People are getting older. Healthcare is getting better. We are living longer. By 2025, the number of Americans alone over 60 years of age will increase by 70%. That is a fundamental change in the shape of society. We need to face the challenge in every country of an aging population. And this is not just America and Europe. This is China. This is Japan. This is India. These societies are the global economic powerhouses, and they'd better learn how to handle huge numbers of older workers and older people. People will rearrange their careers as they get older. Their family life will change as they get older. One of the reasons is people will not be able to afford to retire. Their pension plans have gone. The government pension plans are underfunded. Their insurance schemes have disappeared. Their healthcare costs have risen. What are you going to do? You're going to stay at work. Now, we do many surveys in Manpower Group of every age group and what their preferences for work and life are. Let me tell you, today, there are two groupings in the world of work who have almost identical preferences. This might shock you. One group are workers over the age of 55. The other group are workers from the age of 16 to 22. They both have almost identical attitudes to how they want to work. They're not interested in your company pension plan. They're not interested in saving. They want their money, they want it now, they want you to be responsible for their careers, they want you to train them, develop them, and look after their skills. And you better do it fast or else they will go to the next company. So, older workers want flexibility. We need to design workplaces to understand that. Multiple careers will become commonplace in the future world of work. Aging individuals will demand new skills as they return to the workforce. The global economy as a whole will be viewed through the lens or the microscope of health. Some of the biggest emerging segments in global economy will be healthcare, leisure, and insurance and security, especially for older people. So if you're not in those businesses, you might think about getting into them. The second one, global dynamic, is the rise of smart machines and smart systems. Workplace automation and computation will get rid of workers in certain jobs. It'll move them out of repetitive tasks. I had a long discussion yesterday about first-level maquiladores jobs and how to get to the next level of skills and investment. It is getting too cheap to replace a worker in a repetitive job with a machine. And trust me, it'll get cheaper every day from now on. We've got to work out what we're good at. Over the next decade, new smart machines will enter offices, factories, and homes in numbers that we've never seen before. The very presence of these computers and machines amongst us will force us to confront a critical question for ourselves, which is, what are humans good at? Why and where are we better than machines? What is our place alongside machines in this new computational world? In some areas, a new generation of automation will replace humans. New expectations and standards of performance will have to be developed for human interaction with machines. We'd better form a new partnership with machines and understand where we are better than them. Third dynamic, there is a new computational world based on a massive amount of information. IBM recently announced that every nanosecond on this planet, there are 1.7 trillion devices connected. At every nanosecond, 1.7 trillion devices. That is a lot of information. Massive increases in sensors and processing power make the world a programmable system. We have enough data, literally, to program the world. The diffusion of sensors, communications, and processing power into everyday objects is unleashing an unprecedented torrent of data which we can use. Let me tell you a very scary personal story. I flew into Tokyo recently. I got into a taxi and the taxi driver happened to speak very good English. As you know, when you drive from Narita Airport to downtown Tokyo, the first bit takes 2.5 hours, and then when you get into town, it goes quite quickly. And we were flowing through the center of Tokyo on the overhead freeways, and the traffic slowed for a minute. And I noticed something. There were giant billboards with advertisements on right next to the road. But the advertisement didn't stay for 20, 30, 40 seconds. It changed every 10 seconds. And I said to the driver, what is going on? I mean, I glanced at that and I saw something, but then it changed immediately. He said, mister, this is a new system we have in Tokyo. Every car in Tokyo has a GPS chip and a tracker in it. It is possible now for advertising companies to track the movement of your car, realize when your car is approaching a billboard, and immediately, based on your personal information, put an ad up there that will appeal to you. So if I'm a female, it's going to come up with Jimmy Choo shoes. And if it's me, it's going to come up with the latest computer technology. And if it's you, it might be a new car. And if it's you, it might be some really nice fashion that you love because the system knows you shop for that kind of fashion. That's the kind of information and data processing world that we are in today. And this is really quite scary. This world will increasingly, on the skills side, demand the individual ability to interact with data in huge, huge volumes. The ability for people to see patterns of data, to interpret it, and to do something with it will be a future skill in the workforce. The fourth global dynamic is a new media ecology. Everybody knows what media is. Everything from news on the TV to the little pop-up ads on the internet to the newspaper, all of the data that we get is media. There's a new communication tool set coming out, and it requires new individual literacies to be able to use that media and the information. As technologies for video production, digital animation, augmented reality, gaming ad media and editing become even more sophisticated and widespread, this new ecosystem will change the whole of the world of media. Text-based interaction is falling very quickly, where you read something and you respond to it in text. Much more today, we're interacting with virtual images, virtual dimensions, and new kinds of information flow. Frankly, our brains are not wired to do this. We need to rewire our brain to understand. Guess what? The reason we don't understand it is we grew up with normal media, normal interactions, newspapers. Kids today grow up with virtual interaction, and that's what the world is changing to. We must have a new approach to data. Just one cautionary tale. In this world of new data, which is growing very, very fast, one thing we need to protect is the relevance and validity of information on a corporate scale, a government scale, and an individual scale. If something happens anywhere in the world, it's possible to log on and get 300 different interpretations of what is happening. This is what happened when you saw the Arab Spring social media development. There were hundreds of different interpretations of what happened in Tahrir Square. We must be careful to discriminate that the information we see is not necessarily the right information. So we need new filters and new processes to understand that. The other thing we need to protect is our personal data, information about ourselves on the internet. If you go onto the internet and put an individual in there, you can find out everything about them, from this person is a mass murderer to this person is an angel. How do we get information about us to be true? That is going to be a huge challenge for the internet in future and for us. The next one, Global Dynamic 5, that will impact the world of work and talent, is what I call superstructured organizations. Today, we, the Fortune 500 companies, should be very afraid. Let me tell you why we should be afraid, be it IBM, ExxonMobil, or Manpower Group. We should be afraid because this gentleman down here, with somebody else, can start a virtual company tomorrow, have an internet presence within a week, and look like they are a global company within 2 weeks, with global response, global procurement, global provision of services and products, outsourced services, intellectual property services that are bought in from outside, legal, human resource, IT, the whole thing. I can create a global corporation in 2 weeks with 2 people. Do you think we big boys had better start being scared? I think we'd better be scared. And that will call upon us in big companies to be as flexible and as reactive as a tiny company that has superstructured itself, made itself look 1,000 times bigger than it really is. Just about the only advantage that a global corporation has today is access to finance and, in relevant, critical situations, a global presence. But many growing industries and economies don't live in that world. You don't need huge capital. You don't need to be present in 200 countries. You can do it all from your back room and you can make a load of money. So, we've got to work out, as big companies, how we compete with those small companies. A new generation of organization concepts is arriving, and it's arriving very, very quickly. Another issue that we must understand, locally and globally, is the globally connected world. Of course, we all know that you can talk to anyone, anytime. You can Google a tiny little village in northwestern China and find out all the data immediately. Increased global interconnectivity puts diversity and adaptability at the center of your organization. We've got to have people working for us that understand a global economy and a global workforce. It's no longer good enough to understand what it's like to take orders, produce something, and sell it in Chihuahua. I'm sorry, I don't care whether you're a 2-person organization or a 10,000 people organization. You need to understand global issues. Globalization, of course, is the long-term trend towards greater exchange and integration across global geographic borders. Organizations, from a resource and an infrastructure point of view, need to understand that global market. Where can you source the right skills in the right place, at the right cost, at the right time for your production flow, for your output, for your service company? Organizations from resource and infrastructure-constrained markets in developing countries like India and China, in terms of using new organization shapes, are moving much faster than we are in the West. We need to get up to speed. The last global issue I'd like to mention is what I call the rise of values in the human age. As we enter an age where talent is more important than capital, we need to understand that people want to see a contribution to the world, not just to the economy. And in large global corporations, we are seeing that pressure all of the time. This was originally called global corporate social responsibility. Is it important, and why? Well, it's important because we're all being forced into convergence on making a social contribution as a set of corporations. This is a good thing. It's good because making a social contribution isn't just the right thing to do. Guess what? It's the most profitable thing to do on a global basis or a national basis. There are 4 key dynamics that are pushing companies towards making more social contribution in their societies. First one I like to point out is, governments, international organizations, and not-for-profits just haven't got the job done. Everything from refugees to disadvantaged communities to trafficked people, governments and international organizations have failed to solve those problems. It's the responsibility of global companies and local companies to solve or help solve those problems. So the 4 dynamics that are pushing us into having more values in our large companies are regulations. There are more global regulations today in terms of how you operate ethically than there have ever been before. They're much heavier for US corporations than European corporations, but generally governance and control is increasing on a global basis. Secondly, our customers are forcing us into more social responsibility. We make hundreds of thousands of bids for potential projects with our customers every year. In almost every one of them we analyze today, there is a requirement that you meet certain ethical standards for the treatment of people, the sourcing of your materials, where you sell things, how you sell things. All of these constraints are basic elements of the bid process. So we're finding if you do not conform to these ethical standards, then guess what? You don't even get to make a bid. That is forcing companies to do more and more ethically. When you do more ethically, one of the first issues your employees and your customers ask you to look at is your supply chain. Where do you get things? Are you using forced labor anywhere in your supply chain? This question, when I get it from either my friends in the trade unions or not-for-profit organizations, they say, have you guaranteed that every one of your suppliers is not using forced labor? And I say, yeah, we're working on it. And they say, well, haven't you done it? And I say, listen to the numbers. As a global corporation, in terms of first-level suppliers, we have 1.2 million first-level suppliers that supply us direct. If you go to the second level, we have 19.9 million suppliers supplying our suppliers that supply us. If you go 3 steps back in the supply chain, it's 100 million suppliers. So, there is a necessity to check your supply chain. But bear in mind, this is a huge, long-term project if you want to check where your products and where your materials and where your work comes from. But there is a huge pressure on corporations to check supply chains. The last and most important contribution to encouraging corporations to do more ethically and more socially is our employees. It's our current employees and it's our potential employees. Because people that work in companies today want to make sure that you just don't operate well, but that you operate ethically. They want you to help change the world. 12 or 13 years ago, Manpower Group did local workforce development as our social contribution. We'd put inner city kids to work. We'd train disabled people and put them into work. That's what we did. A number of years back, we did a global survey, and we were feeling very good about ourselves, thinking our employees are going to say we're great in social contribution. Actually, what they said was, you're not great because you don't stand for anything on a global basis. So we stood up and we recognized that we had to be knights in shining armor against certain things. Our values are that if anybody in this world wants a job, we believe they should have an opportunity to have a job. Therefore, in the reverse, we're against everything that is the negative of that. And the negative of that are groups of people that have never had a chance to find a job or a decent job. So we stand on a global basis to end human trafficking, to train and find a job for every one of the 35 million permanently displaced refugees in the world, and to stop the abuse of migrant workers around the world, of which there are 250 million abused migrant workers. Now, that's what I call making a contribution. Why has that been good for our employees? Because issues like devoting your company to values and changing the world make your employees want to stay with your company. What is that worth? The answer is, in a big company, it's worth a fortune. Let's say in a company like Manpower, as we do, you have 4 million employees globally. If you can reduce the number of people that leave every year, or the attrition, as the Americans call it, by 0.5%, you save the company $200 million. Hey, I love this social contribution stuff. Our employees feel great about us. More of them stay in the company longer, and I save $200 million a year. Thank you very much. So, social contribution is not just a good thing to do, It's a smart thing to do. And as we enter the new world of work, where talent defines your success, you will find that you need to make a bigger and bigger social contribution, or else your employees will leave. And by the way, there are many other spin-offs. For the last 4 years, we have been nominated as the most ethical company in our industry worldwide. We're not just proud of that, but we put it into every bid we make to a customer. We can prove to you, Mr. Customer, not only do we have a great brand, but we're the most ethical company in our business. And believe me, that's important in a business that is in human resources, recruitment, staffing, contracting, outsourcing, career counseling, consulting, etc. People look at whether you are ethical. Why should they do that? This industry that I am in is one of the worst industries in the world. Does that shock you that I say that? Being president at Manpower and being the head of our industry federation globally, do you know what happens? Many organizations around the world call themselves recruitment companies. It'll shock you to find out that 40% of people around the world that are trafficked into modern-day slavery are trafficked through recruitment agencies. We have a global mission in our industry, and especially in our company, to make sure that governments enact law to put those people out of business because they are trafficking people into modern-day slavery. So when I say the industry is bad, the industry has some bad players and some good players. What we're trying to do is to make sure we bankrupt or put in jail the bad players. So, a number of issues, and then just a quick wrap-up. Here are some of the things that I would love you to be conscious of as you design your future in the world of work. These are individual line items that we've got to fit in the framework of what I've told you so that we can design effective economies, effective workforces inside of companies, and effective employment markets. Number one, the important and growing role of women in the world of work. Women are the most underutilized asset, both intellectually and skill-wise, in the world of work. We do not have enough women in the workforce. They are by far the better educated in almost every country in the world. They are by far more diligent, more dependable, and more driving in work than men are. I didn't say that just to make the women happy. Just look at any of the global surveys you can find. We need to make sure that we promote more women into the right places at the right time. Secondly, and I mentioned this before, we need to be conscious of social and political issues as we operate as businesses. I'm sorry, you cannot separate business, economy, politics, and the world today. They are intertwined. Next, every government must focus on one thing: education, investment, education, investment, education, investment, education, invest. You got the message? Anybody from governments? More and more investment in education and skilling young people. Today we can define the elements that will drive your economic growth. Out of that, we can tell you the skills your workforce needs. Out of that, we need your help in government to design education, to produce the young people and retrain the older people we need to grow the economy. Next, the increasing role of technology in everything we do. I talked about it before. New media ecology, new communications ecology. Everything we do is becoming more technological. So don't think anymore that you can throw your cell phone in the swimming pool. It's impossible. You need to learn how to use it properly this time. The mastering of new energies. There's a huge transition globally from old energy production based on coal and easily available oil to new sources of natural gas and solar energy. We must promote those new energies on a global basis. One little ecological and environmental thing: if we don't clean up our air and we don't clean up our water, this planet's hardly going to exist in 70 years. What do you want to leave for your kids? I'd like to leave a planet where they can have grandchildren as well. We need to do that. We need to understand where the geopolitical power rests. We need to understand that the Northern Hemisphere is only a partner in the global economy now, not the ruler in the global economy. We need to understand that the new players are here, and they're here to stay. China, India, Indonesia, and other emerging market economies. We need to understand that the mobilization of people and talent is defining our economic future. We need to understand in the OECD countries that we've got to promote diversity and migration. Look at the stupidity of Europe. Look at the stupidity of the United States. Why, they say, let's close our borders. Let's make it a political issue. Close the country down so we can give jobs to the people that are already here. Wrong solution. United States was a great country built on immigration, especially of highly talented, multicultural, skilled workers, and they're losing it by closing the borders. They know they need to open them, but politically they can't. Europe is almost identical. We need to make society responsible for its own future. We've got to give access to individuals to work, access to the political process, and we've got to increase governance and really suppress corruption. We need integrated education and skilling solutions, and we have an increased need to take full responsibility for managing ourselves. No longer can you say it's his fault, her fault, or their fault. I'm sorry, everything that happens in your society today is our fault. Take a responsibility to change it. I'm going to finish off by telling you one more very short definition of what the world is like today. It's very hard to describe the world as I see it, because I'm in the world all over the place all of the time. But I think I came up with a way to give you a real emotional feeling of what the world is today. So if you would humor me, imagine that the world is not billions of people. Imagine the world is only 100 people, okay? So we've gone from billions to 100 people. Let me describe the world as if it was 100 people. It's 57 Asians and 21 Europeans. It's 14 Americans and 8 Africans. That's what it looks like. It's 30 Caucasians and 70 non-Caucasians. It's 30 Christians and it's 70 non-Christians. It's 89 heterosexuals and 11 homosexuals. 6 people out of the 100 own 70% of the wealth of the world. 5 of them are American and 1 is Mexican, and I guess you could guess who that is. More seriously, 80 of the 100 people live in poverty permanently. 70 of the 100 are illiterate. 50, half of them, have permanent malnutrition and not enough to eat every day. 1 is dying. 1 is being born. 1 has a computer. 1 has a degree. But 80 have a cell phone. Now there's interesting. My friends, the truth is the world we work in, the world we live in, is changing. We're changing it, and the environment is changing us. The truth is that 1 million people die every week. 65,000 people every day are trafficked into modern-day slavery. 500 million people in the world are persecuted, in prison, or tortured against their will. As you go through your daily life, your work, your society, and raising your kids, please remember those issues and do something about it. Thank you very much indeed.